So I think that what we should do, I think we set the stage about why we're talking about this,
Okay.
maybe a little more than we needed to.
I'll move on.
Yeah, I think we should talk about what are the fundamental mistakes that it's providing, so the person listening can actually, realize, okay, maybe, maybe if I am following this, where am I going
Okay.
wrong, and where can I go right?
So I'm going to steal your analogy because I thought it was well stated when we had this conversation.
He usually does do
Yeah, I do that.
that.
So essentially, where I kind of alluded to it earlier, where a lot of the advice seems to flow towards is the idea of uncovering the right person, discovering the right person, identifying that person. So the analogy that you used, Kobe, that I thought was really apt is it's the idea of mining for potential, right? Mining is a finite activity. Eventually, the mine is going to run out of precious gems, and you'll have to find another solution, right? This idea of uncovering the precious gem, and then all you have to do is just polish it a little bit and put it into the right place, and it'll sparkle.
Right.
Right. That is a short-term solution. And that's where the advice really tends to focus on is how do you identify, well, that's one of the problems. How do you identify those people and put them into the right person in the right position, which that statement I agree with. The other big problem that I have with the way the advice around people and culture was given is that, first of all, please don't confuse your values with your culture. Just because you as an organization or as a leadership team have created a mission statement or a value statement or have identified what your core values are, that does not automatically create culture. And so the way that the advice I'm kind of blending the different books that I've read, but generally the way that the advice is presented in these different resources is that if you, what you want to do is find people who fit in with your culture. And that seems like a pretty benign statement, or even it seems like a pretty reasonable statement to make, because yes, you want people who share the same values that you do. You want people who will fit in with your culture. That's the language that is used. The problem with that statement is that it's not an inclusive statement, right? It's not about finding people who will fit in. It's not about finding people who you can bring in and have them assimilate to the same way of doing things, because all that does is it creates this dull gray, just bland environment where everybody thinks the same, acts the same, says the same things. There's no room for diversity of thought or opinion or perspective, which is incredibly important and very, very valuable in everything that you do. If you can actually create a culture that values and seeks out diversity of opinion, that's huge. And so this is part of the problem that I have with the language that is used, because it sounds good and it sounds reasonable, but it actually takes you down a path that I feel is unhealthy, that I feel we have actually gone down that path as a society of workplaces, of expecting to find the perfect person who's going to fit in with our culture, versus the other part of the analogy that I'm continuing to steal from Kobe, is the idea of, rather than mining, farming, right? So in a farming activity, you are intentionally creating the conditions, the soil, the fertilizer, you're planting a seed in the right conditions, and you are taking steps to nurture that seed.
Right.
That is a sustainable talent process of being, you still need to identify the right kind of people who will work with your organization, but focus on values, not forcing people to conform to what you already believe. Seeking out diversity in thought and perspective is huge. Allowing people to be their authentic self is incredibly important in creating inclusion and belonging, and allow, like we've talked about our hierarchy many times, and we'll keep going back to that because it is core fundamental theory for how workplace cultures are built. This idea of you need to develop your talent because identification is not enough to retain people. There are so many companies who are looking for that right person. There are so many direct and indirect competitors who are all struggling with talent attraction and retention. That if what you are offering is a workplace where everybody looks the same, feels the same, thinks the same, acts the same, says the same things, that's not a way to attract and retain talent.
Yeah, and a lot of it is that this is kind of, if you boil down the mistakes in the advice, fundamentally, it's that they're prioritizing the wrong things, and the things that they do get right, that they do state, are, they're usually not bang on, usually kind of roughly in the ballpark, or they're barely scratching the surface. Or they kind of start on the right path and then go in the wrong direction. Because you're right, it values, or it advises a very mining approach to how we attract, retain, and motivate talent. Because it's about finding people, it's about placing them in a position, and it's about making sure that they assimilate, and that they fall in lockstep, because your subjective opinion about what success looks like is the empirical data that you need to verify that you have a good employee. And that is largely what it all kind of boils down to. And that's kind of why we see, workplaces that are creating integration instead of inclusion, because they've identified a person that looks the way they want them to look, meets the expectation of diversity, but then doesn't actually let them belong and actually fully get their opinions and their perspectives and everything. And it makes a very superficial engagement. It's why we're not spending enough time training people, why we're not developing talent, because we think we have to find them pre-made, ready to go, like insert, and then they'll work perfectly. And why we don't do enough internal promotions, because we don't create these great career ladders or career paths for people, because it's about finding the right person that will go into the position to kind of achieve to achieve the outcome. And a lot of these really fundamental mistakes that we're seeing that are causing a lot of these problems with the labor market, and what's going against and making the future of work concept so much harder to achieve, is this fundamental breakdown of trying to have this mining assimilation, fit in approach, when what we should be doing is taking the farming approach. Like you said, we need to be creating the soil, we need to be formulating the conditions, providing the support that's needed to nurture talent and give it room to grow. We need to be looking for those diverse perspectives. We need to be looking to put people in positions where they can play to their strengths. We need to be realizing that the culture is not based on the mission statement that we define as managers. The culture is actually best defined by what people who are working in the organization think the culture is. Because we can't dictate culture. Culture creates itself. And if you're not creating the conditions that will have an effective workplace culture, then you end up creating a bad culture, despite the fact that you might say it's a good culture.